You know, every single piece of technology you use, every towering skyscraper you walk past, and literally every bite of food you eat today originates from the dirt, the water, and the minerals of our planet. It's kind of wild to think about, right? We exist in this hyper-digital world, but our entire global economy is inextricably tethered to the physical extraction of the Earth's resources. So in today's Explainer, we are breaking down the absolute foundational chapter of human geography, primary activities. We're going to explore the complex physical systems humans use to survive, thrive, and essentially build massive economies from the ground up.
Here's a quick roadmap of how we'll break all this down today. First, defining primary activities. Second, gathering and hunting. Third, herding and livestock rearing. Fourth, the evolution of agriculture. And finally, extracting Earth's minerals.
All right, let's jump right into part one, defining what these primary activities actually are.
So, at a basic level, primary activities are economic activities directly dependent on the environment. This involves the absolute raw utilization of the Earth's resources. We're talking land, water, vegetation, building materials, and minerals. Now, this definition really serves as the baseline for our entire global economy. It's super easy to lose sight of this when we live in modern service economies, but a staggering percentage of the global workforce remains tied to these foundational tasks. Whether it's casting a net into the ocean, cultivating a field, or drilling thousands of feet into the Earth's crust, these activities represent the crucial first step in global supply chains. They're actually the undeniable dividing line that often shapes the economic trajectory of developing versus developed economies.
Now here's a really interesting piece of trivia for you. People engaged in these foundational economic activities are formally known as red-collar workers. This distinct classification exists because of the primarily outdoor, physically demanding nature of the work. Think about how we categorize labor, right? We have white-collar professionals in offices, blue-collar workers in manufacturing and secondary industries, and at the absolute base of this pyramid, you have the red-collar workforce out in the elements. They interact directly with the physical world to extract and generate the raw materials that allow those blue and white-collar sectors to even exist in the first place.
Moving right along to Section 2, let's look at the oldest of them all, gathering and hunting.
Quick question for you, and it ties directly back to one of humanity's most fundamental economic practices. Do you have any idea what actually gives chewing gum its chew? It's this stuff called chicle. So, after the flavor of your gum is gone, the part that remains is made from the milky juice of the zapotra tree. See, gathering isn't just some ancient survival tactic relegated to the past. It is a vital, living part of modern global supply chains. While primitive gathering involves extracting plants for basic subsistence in really harsh climates, commercial gatherers today are harvesting highly valuable leaves, barks, and medicinal plants on a massive scale. After just a little initial processing, these raw materials yield products that generate billions of dollars globally. We're talking quinine used in medicines, tannins for leather making, natural rubber, and yep, the chicle in your chewing gum.
Okay, that brings us to Section 3, herding and livestock rearing.
So, nomadic herding, also known as pastoral nomadism, is this primitive subsistence activity where herders rely entirely on their animals: food, clothing, shelter, tools, transport, the whole shebang. And this isn't just an economic activity, it profoundly shapes entire community structures and cultures. These groups practice something called transhumance, which means moving in these highly orchestrated seasonal migrations. They navigate traditional territories, going from plains to mountainous pastures in the summer and back down in the winter. And it's dictated entirely by the availability of natural pastures and water sources.
Now, commercial livestock rearing is a stark departure from traditional nomadism. It's a completely different ballgame. This is a highly capital-intensive, stationary, and strictly profit-driven enterprise. Instead of migrating across open lands, commercial ranches are massive, permanent fixtures, usually covering huge, fenced-in parcels of land. And the technological leap here is just staggering. These operations focus intensely on scientific breeding, rigorous disease control, and genetic specialization. They're usually raising just a single type of animal, like beef cattle or sheep for wool, specifically engineered to supply global export markets.
If we look globally, commercial livestock rearing is heavily concentrated in very specific zones. Think the sprawling prairies of North America, the pampas of South America, and the vast outbacks of Australia. This spatial distribution is deeply analytical because it's a highly organized economic activity. It requires vast amounts of available land, significant upfront capital, and sophisticated transport networks. Therefore, it thrives exactly where historical expansion, favorable temperate climates, and modern infrastructure all perfectly align to support the massive scale needed for export.
Which leads us nicely into Section 4, the evolution of agriculture.
Let's start with primitive subsistence agriculture. This heavily dominates specific tropical regions across the globe, especially in Africa, South and Central America, and Southeast Asia.
In this system, farming communities literally consume nearly everything they grow locally. The primary goal is simply to sustain the farmer's family or the local tribe, with very, very little surplus ever reaching a broader market. But this localized approach makes these populations incredibly vulnerable to shifting climatic conditions. Even minor disruptions in rainfall or temperature can lead to immediate food insecurity, which really highlights a fragile dependence on local environments.
On the completely opposite end of the spectrum is extensive commercial grain cultivation. Found mostly in mid-latitude semi-arid lands, these farms are absolutely enormous, necessitating total mechanization from plowing all the way to harvesting. The principal crop is typically wheat. Now, the defining economic characteristic of this system is actually a fascinating paradox. There is a low yield per acre, but a tremendously high yield per person. Because the farms span thousands of acres and heavy machinery does the literal heavy lifting, a single farmer can produce an astronomical amount of grain. It's a system designed to maximize human labor efficiency rather than land density. Then, in highly developed regions like northwestern Europe and eastern North America, we see the rise of mixed farming. Here, crop cultivation and animal rearing are given equal importance. Farms will grow crops like wheat, barley, and root crops, while simultaneously keeping cattle, sheep, and poultry. This is absolutely crucial because it provides a reliable economic safety net. If a crop fails due to bad weather, the livestock still provide a steady stream of income. It's a highly sophisticated, integrated agricultural system dictated by geographical advantages, temperate climates, and being in very close proximity to wealthy urban markets that demand diverse food products.
And, beyond just what is grown, how the farming is structurally organized offers a pretty amazing masterclass in geopolitical and economic ideology. On one side, we have the cooperative farming movement, which was massively successful in places like Denmark, where practically every single farmer is a member. It's fundamentally capitalist and completely voluntary. Independent farmers pool their resources to buy inputs cheaper and sell products at higher margins. Now contrast this with collective farming, or the kolkhoz model from the erstwhile Soviet Union. This was a forced, state-driven model based on the social ownership of production, where independent farmers were compelled to pool their land and labor to hit strict state-mandated targets. These represent two vastly different socioeconomic approaches attempting to extract the exact same primary resources.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Extracting Earth's Minerals.
The extraction of the Earth's mineral resources is for sure vital for the secondary industries that build our modern world. But there's a massive geopolitical shift happening in human geography right now. Developed economies are rapidly retreating from the mining, processing, and refining stages of raw minerals. This retreat is largely driven by soaring labor costs and increasingly strict environmental regulations in wealthier nations. Conversely, developing countries, which have large labor forces and are striving to rapidly raise their standards of living, are expanding their mining operations to fill that void. Today, several nations in Africa, South America, and Asia derive over 50% of their national earnings strictly from mineral extraction.
So, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. As developed nations outsource the heavy, labor-intensive lifting of resource extraction, are developing nations setting themselves up for unprecedented wealth or just rapid resource depletion? Furthermore, does this dynamic create a highly vulnerable global supply chain where the wealthiest nations are entirely reliant on developing countries for the critical minerals that power all of our modern technology? It is a deeply complex reality, but it perfectly encapsulates exactly why understanding human geography and the raw extraction of these primary resources remains profoundly essential to analyzing our world today.